apply for the new SBA loans. We currently have everybody on mute, and we'll keep you there. If you have a specific question, please make sure it's relevant to this topic and post it in the chat on the side. We will have several questions that were already sent in, and we will try to get to everybody's questions as much as we can during this virtual chat. I want to thank Williamson County and the Williamson County Chambers of Commerce and Economic Development Departments who are joining us on this call. This is truly a team effort, it's a group effort, and so I really appreciate everybody who's making this happen. I want to give a special thank you to our bank and our presenter, Mr. Mike Litton. Mike is the Executive Vice President and Director of SBA Lending for our bank. He has been getting constant updates and direction from the SBA, as well as trying to field all sorts of questions from people like me. So I appreciate Mike's patience with us all. We truly appreciate you taking time to go over this. We are recording this, and so again, if you have any questions, please post them to the chat, and we will try to get to that as soon as possible. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mike Litton.
Good morning, everybody. Hope y'all are all staying safe and well out there, and just know that with our spirit, we will get through this. So these are unprecedented times, obviously, in the history of the SBA, which was created in 1953. We are doing things that we've never done before. Right now, banks have been tasked with pushing out $349 billion in the payroll payment protection program. Historically, the SBA has been a direct lender during disasters. They have a disaster loan office, and generally those disasters have been regional in scope, such as a hurricane, flooding, wildfires, or whatever. So certainly not anything of this magnitude, not in a national capacity. So the SBA, in conjunction with the Department of Treasury, made the determination that there was no way that they had the bandwidth to push this program out, and so they enlisted banks' help. So I've been making SBA loans for over 20 years. I've probably made $500 million of SBA loans, either directly or as a manager of a program. So I know what I'm doing on that end, but we are in completely new territory. I've spent the last week and a half reading bills and interpreting language and talking with SBA attorneys in office, or back in Washington rather, and saying, what about this and what about that? And so, in the history of SBA, they've never pushed out a program this quickly. Generally, it takes 6 months to a year, and they did this like in 2 weeks or a week and a half, really. It was the Friday before last when the president signed the bill into act. So we're doing the best we can. We appreciate everybody's patience. I know there's some frustration out there. So let me just kind of try to clarify the landscape for everybody. So right now, as it stands, there are 2 types of disaster loans available from the SBA. The first one is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL, as they have been referring to it. And that one is available directly from the SBA. It is not a forgivable loan. It can be used for any business purpose. It has a term of 30 years and a rate of 3.75%. To apply for that loan, you would go to disaster.sba.gov, and then they've got a site there, and you can apply online. The last I heard, it was taking about 4 weeks to process these loans. There's quite a bit of demand. They're going as fast as they can. There is a portion of it where they can get you some emergency funding of $10,000. I believe that's within a few days. That's the best information I have on that. But for those folks that want to do that, they are certainly welcome to do so. That's directly from the SBA. Some people have said, well, if I apply for that, can I get one? Can I get the payroll protection plan loan from the banks? And yes, you can. They just can't be used for the same purpose right now. What I've been seeing is that if you get the PPP loan or the payroll protection plan loan, it's going to automatically refinance the EIDL loan in the new loan amount. So what is the payroll protection plan loan? Basically, that was designed to help small businesses protect their employees, keep them on the payroll. Lots of folks have been shuttered: hair salons, restaurants, coffee shops, just lots of folks that can't open their doors. And so they're in danger of losing their employees. And so This program was designed to help those small businesses be able to retain their employees. And so basically what it is it provides a loan amount of 2.5 times the average monthly payroll, and that's averaged over the last 12 months. And that can include payroll taxes, and it can include benefits. It will not include 1099 employees. A lot of people have been asking about that. 1099 are subcontractors, and they can apply directly on their own if they want to. And so when people apply for this, basically they're sending an electronic application. It's 2 pages to their bank, along with the pertinent payroll information. I suggest that if you use a third party like Hill Country Payroll or ADP, somebody like that, that you would provide statements for the last 12 months. That's very helpful. We need to identify employee by employee because we're taking an average monthly payroll. However, if anybody on the payroll is earning more than $100,000 a year, then the amount in excess of $100,000 is excluded from the average calculation. So we have to have a granular enough report to where we can see, you know, what all those salaries were. Sorry about that. I'm at my home office. That was Washington. Hope it's a good call. Anyway, basically, there has been unprecedented demand for this. We are inputting these as fast as we can. I know a lot of other lenders that I've talked to, they're doing the same thing. Some of these, it takes about 15 minutes for us to upload. Some of them, it takes an hour. It just depends. The system is really clunky. It wasn't meant to do this. I'm surprised, really, that it hasn't crashed. And now that I said that, it probably will. So I hope I didn't jinx it. But any rate, so the payroll protection plan, to go on about that, it is a largely forgivable loan to the extent that the portion is used for payroll and you retain your employees, or if you've already laid them off, then you hire them back and you pay them back pay through the current. So the loan will provide for 8 weeks of payroll, and then some portion could be used for rents and utilities. If you have a mortgage, it could be used for the interest payment on the mortgage, but not the principal reduction. And it could also be used as interest on other debt, but not principal reduction. So those are the only allowed uses. These loans do not have collateral. They do not have personal guarantees. However, if it is discovered that a loan is used for unauthorized purposes, then that triggers 2 things. 1, it will trigger an automatic recourse to the principals. And then 2, it could constitute fraud on a federally guaranteed loan, which is a felony. So folks need to be very careful about what they're doing with these loans. We are relying on representations that the borrowers are making to us as actual and factual. We are not tasked with ascertaining whether those are indeed factual. So again, on these applications, people need to be as honest as possible. It is also a felony to make a false representation or a significant false representation on a federally guaranteed loan. We don't know how long it's going to take to push this money out. I'm hearing various reports. Quite frankly, I'd be surprised if it lasts through the end of the week. I heard that in one report from an economist that they felt that there was about $1 trillion worth of demand for this $349 billion. So I don't want to exasperate anybody. We're working these loans as fast as we can in the order that we receive them. I am told that they're already working on phase 4 stimulus plan. Y'all may have seen that there is some back and forth between the Senate and the House about how that's going to work. I'm sure it'll get resolved. The president has been very decisive. Please know that this is an unprecedented event in history, and I've never seen anything like it. So for all the faults and hiccups and glitches that it has, it's putting something out there that we hope will really benefit small businesses and the employees in the long run. It's just a Herculean effort. We appreciate everybody's patience. So with that, I will entertain any questions that y'all may have.
Very good, Mike. One of the questions that we had was in the payroll protection program, is that only good for full-time employees or is it total payroll?
Total payroll, just not 1099s.
Very good. If you have, I know that the time period that they were talking about for this was February to June of last year, something along those lines. If you've added employees since then, how are you able to account for that?
I'm telling people that we want to see the last rolling 12 months. You know, if you wanted to be belt and suspenders, give us all of 2019 and then the first quarter of this year. But really, if we look at the last rolling 12 months, I think that will incorporate, you know, those late additions.
Very good. Excellent. The payback period for all of the new loans has been deferred for 12 months from the time of loan origination, I believe. What about current SBA loans that you were paying on prior to the pandemic?
Okay, first of all, let me address, so these PPP loans will be deferred for 6 months and then possibly up to 12 months. I am not sure what the parameters are for that additional deferment. They haven't told us, or I just haven't had time to digest it. I've been doing other things, but it will be deferred for 6 months. So the forgivable portion, the portion that's used for payroll, could conceivably be forgiven within 8 months, 8 weeks after dispersal.
Very good. Very good.
And then to your other question, Tony, anybody that has an existing SBA 7A loan that's not in default, the SBA is going to be making your loan payments for the next 6 months.
Very good. Good information. If a worker's hours have already been cut, are they able to apply for the full amount they should have been working to bring them back to full-time status?
Well, again, we're going to be looking at the average payroll statements for the last 12 months. So, you know, if they've been cut, then that's going to average it down a little bit, obviously.
Yep. The last one that I got beforehand was, what decides if you get a 30-year term for these loans?
Okay, so that goes back to the economic injury disaster loan, or the EIDL program that you applied directly to the SBA. That is a 30-year term.
Okay.
So coming back now then to the payroll protection plan loan that the banks are administrating, the portion that is not forgiven will be termed out over 2 years on a fully amortizing note at 1% interest.
Excellent. Excellent. We've got some questions from the audience here. Has a single local business actually received any money or even heard back from the SBA regarding their application yet?
Possibly, I don't know. We just got final direction late Friday afternoon. We started inputting these Friday night. ISBA coordinator, Emily Silverlake, and I have been working about 12 to 15 hours a day, just inputting these things. We have a number of approvals. So basically what we do is we go online through a portal that the SBA has called eTran, which stands for electronic transmission. And so we're uploading this information, and if it's successfully done and is taken and accepted by the SBA, then it generates an SBA loan number. So remember, we have never administrated, or banks have never administrated disaster loans before, but we do plenty of regular 7A loans. And so it's kind of it's the same system. And when we input for a 7A loan, once it generates that SBA loan number, then we're good. We have that portion of allocation. So then it's just up to the bank to get it closed. Direction is still kind of trickling out on to what kind of documentation we're going to need. I am told by one source, and this has not been confirmed, that banks will be able to use their own internal documents instead of having to go to third parties or attorneys. So that should shorten up the process a little bit. You know, I'm probably anticipating just a promissory note, a certification page from the borrower, maybe a short loan agreement, but again, there is no personal guarantee and there is no collateral. So it should be limited documentation. That's the idea. That's the scope of these things. Also, we will, on these applications, we are accepting electronic versions. However, the banks must collect the wet signatures within 6 months. I'm instructing my team, I want to get it done quicker than that just to make sure we have it. We just have to make sure that we're comfortable with a process whereby we can ensure that the actual paper documents that we get are free of the virus. And so we're kind of working on protocols to do that just so we can keep everybody healthy.
Very good. As a new business, I think you may have already spoken to this a little bit, but as a new business, how would you show 12 months of payroll? Are there any other provisions for a newer business? Say if you haven't been a business for 12 months, just show what you've got essentially?
To be eligible, you had to have been in business on February 15, 2020. So if you were in business on that date, then just show whatever you have, or whatever historical statements you have from the time you were.
We're hearing the possibility of another loan coming out this week that's non-payroll. Is there any information on that being released, or do you know anything about that? Oh, Mike, I'm sorry. Hold on one sec. For some reason, you got muted. Hold on. Oh, there we go. You're good to go now. Sorry.
I think I laid my phone down on the wrong spot. So a moment ago, I mentioned that we had been told that there would be a phase 4 stimulus plan. I can only assume that's what it is, Tony. We don't have anything further, or let me put it this way. I've got 2 or 3 sources of information. One of them is NAGLE, the National Association of Government Guaranteed Lenders, which is our lobby group, and they have people actually on the Hill sitting in with the Senate Small Business Subcommittees. And so they've been a really valuable source of information. I've not seen any direction from them, but I haven't had time to check that this morning. As soon as I got up, I was inputting these applications, just trying to make sure everybody got their spot.
Understood. A sole proprietor with one payroll, can they apply for the payroll protection program?
Yes.
Perfect. There's a question. Do you have to have an account at a bank to be able to apply through that bank? Do you have to have an account already?
I can't speak for other banks. As a community bank with a limited amount of bandwidth and resources, we've had to make the very difficult decision at our bank to offer this program to our existing customers only at this time.
Yep. For a nonprofit, in the application, it asks for ownership. Who would they put down as the owner?
That's a very good question. I just was trying to process one of those before this call, and I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. There is a section in the program where we click on nonprofit or 501c3, and I believe it eliminates that ownership section. That's the way it should work. In the history of SBA, nonprofits have never been eligible. You always had to be for profit. Also, faith-based organizations are now eligible. That has never been done before. So they really opened it up. They really opened up the size standards. They had different methodologies for determining whether or not you were a small business. It was kind of a hodgepodge, but just to make it simple for this, if you've got less than 500 employees, then you're eligible, unless you're in a certain NAICS code, which allows for a larger number of employees. And for example, I believe manufacturing, that NAICS code size standard allows for up to 1,500 employees. So, we're seeing some fairly sizable companies apply for this.
Um, the interest rates for the PPP, that's 2.75 for nonprofits and 3.5 for
No,
for-profits?
that's the EIDL, that's the direct
Idle.
loan program. So the interest rate for the PPP on the unforgiven portion is 1% for 2 years.
Very good. Is there any documentation required for each employee, or payroll records will suffice? In other words, do you need to narrow it down to each employee so that you can see that, or?
So the payroll records would need to identify it by employee, just so we can make sure that, again, their remuneration does not exceed $100,000. If it does, then we have to exclude that portion in excess of $100,000 from the average calculation.
Now, there may be some confusion out there. I know that some people are saying that they applied for the loan under the CARES Act, but that part of that act is the payroll protection program, correct? That's all encompassed.
Yes, the PPP is under the CARES Act.
Yes. So if you applied for that under the CARES Act, you applied for those types of loans.
Well, the PPP is under the CARES Act. I don't know that the economic injury disaster loan is under the CARES Act. I believe that's separate, but it really doesn't matter. You either apply directly to the SBA, so that's the EIDL loan, the economic injury disaster, or you apply to banks, that's the PPP. Perfect.
We have one last question, and it's one that you've already answered, but they just, I think it kind of took them by surprise. It says, Mr. Litton, did you say that you expect the funding for these loans to be out before the end of the week?
I hope I'm wrong on that. That's just my conjecture. There's thousands of banks around the country, and some of them are pretty sizable, and they have probably teams of 50 to 100 inputting these things. In my history, probably about 10 years ago, we were coming up on running out of allocation. Each year, Congress allocates so many billions of dollars toward the SBA program, and it was right before Christmas. And I remember that we were having a really good year making loans, and it was apparent that we were going to run out. The SBA is a federal program, and so the federal government's fiscal year starts on 9/30. And so this was right before December, and we were already run through almost the entire years of appropriations. And so a lot of lenders decided, well, we need to get our applications in now before the money dries out. So everybody was trying to push them in all at the same time. And there was so much demand that the SBA system just crashed. And so it's just kind of a herd mentality, if you will. Everybody's in a hurry to get these, and everybody's trying to do the best they can, and everybody's anxious. We understand that. These are very uncertain times. There's lots of anxiety out there. We get that. And so I just can't imagine that, it's going to last that long. I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
Well, and you mentioned earlier that you heard that you read somewhere that there's a need for about 1 trillion, not the 300 plus billion. So
yeah,
it's
that was just one economist's opinion, and I didn't have time to figure out how they got their data, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very good. We did have one late question pop up. What short-term alternatives are there, since the SBA may not work for some, at least not as fast as they say it might? So what are some other alternatives besides an SBA loan?
I would just say talk with your banker, your relationship, and just sit down with them and explain the situation. I know that a lot of banks that have existing loans, even if they're not SBA loans, we understand that people are having some unprecedented challenges. And so at least with community banks, what we're doing is sitting down with those folks and working out a plan to help them through this time. It's always our goal to help the borrower become successful and get through the rough patches.
Absolutely. Well, I believe that's about it as far as the questions that we had. So with that, we want to be mindful of Mr. Litton's time, and we know that you're a very busy man, so we appreciate it. Again, this will conclude our teleconference. We'll have this available as a recording on the Chamber's website. We're going to send it out to several of you out there. So this way, hopefully some of those frequently asked questions have been answered on this. Again, thank you, Mike Litton. Thank you, our bank, for helping answer some of these questions. We want to thank Williamson County for their leadership as well. And thank you to the business community for doing everything you can in these harsh economic times. We truly appreciate all of you out there. So with that, we will conclude this teleconference. Thank you.
Be well, everybody.